Welcome to the Greater Dater Podcast. My name is John Polansky. Right next to me is
Arianna, Jeret.
The amazing Jeff Gross in our studio back there. And today, for the first time, we have a in-studio guest that we're super excited about. In front of me is the amazing Lorae Bradbury.
Thank you.
And Lorrae has an incredible website called sluttygirlproblems.com. And I'm going to let you talk and tell me a little bit about what you do because we're super excited to have you here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's so exciting to be here. Slutty Girl Problems is a website that I created way back in 2011. I was really just feeling like having all of these sexual experiences while I was going through college. There was really no way to talk about it. It was kind of shameful. And even talking to your friends isn't really a great outlet to get positive reinforcement and support. So I created a Twitter account just to kind of anonymously express my experiences and kind of make light of it and make jokes, and realized that so many other women were going through what I was going through and following me on Twitter and saying, oh my gosh, I'm going through the same thing, like what's going on? And realized that it could just be a really amazing source of empowerment to have a website where women could just come and share their stories and also sex tips and just encourage each other to have sex positive lives and to not be ashamed of who they are, their sexuality, or their sexual choices.
Sold.
Jeff's on board. I took a look at your site last night and I was just very impressed. It is so comprehensive. There's everything from shopping to lifestyle to, Jeff, you're going to like this category, MILF tips. So I thought that was interesting. See? He's so easy. I was just very impressed. There's a lot of different things going on.
From MILFs, or that's tips on how to get
MILFs, or how to get MILFs, maybe.
MILFs.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why aren't I writing?
You can.
You should. I think there was only like 3 articles up there or something, or a couple. But anyways, there was hooking up, there's lingerie, events and festivals, and this just seems like a completely thorough site for women in all different types of categories. I don't know. What do you think, Ari?
No, I agree. And what I thought was so great about the site was I had the same experience in my 20s. Yeah. There were no apps back then and there weren't the online sites, but I know that I was really struggling with I want to be the Cosmo girl.
Yeah, absolutely.
And be able to, which you were the Cosmo girl, right? You were featured in Cosmo. And I felt like I had been told that I should be able to be free about exploring my sexuality.
Yeah.
But then when I actually tried that, I felt a lot of inner conflict about it. Like, I don't know, like, was that just fun or was that me being used? I didn't know what to do with it. And there was nowhere I would have talked about that back then. So I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely. I think so many women share that experience because we're taught to be sexy and sexual, but don't share it. Once you share it, once that's gone, it's like there's a stigma that you've kind of given up a piece of yourself, or now you're dirty and like that used up piece of bubble gum. And that's not how it should be. Sexuality is something that we all enjoy. And there's this huge double standard between men and women. But to have that kind of outlet, to kind of just normalize that our sexual experiences are normal, it's not taboo, we're all going through this together, I think is really powerful, helpful.
I just want to read something on the site that I saw that was interesting. And it said, what is a slut? And you said, a slut is a woman who is confident and sexually empowered. She's in control of her sexuality and her choices. She doesn't let anyone define her or her sexuality. She defines herself.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
powerful.
That's some deep stuff right there. So yeah, I'm sure when you talk to everyone about how you got started and the name Slutty Girl Problems, I'm sure there's always maybe a little bit of that negative connotation, like what kind of site is this? So I'm sure you have to explain yourself, but I think this pretty much explains it right here.
Yeah, I would love to. I want to talk more about that term.
Yeah.
But I think, first you're in town. We were so lucky that you're in LA right now because you're not typically.
Thank you for being here.
For Slut Walk LA.
Yes.
And I know I'd love to learn more about really what that entails and what it was like.
Well, Slut Walk LA was really based out of, in reaction to a Toronto police officer who was giving a speech to college students. And he said, well, one way to prevent sexual assault is to not dress like a slut, which isn't at all why sexual assaults happen. It's really not even about sexuality so much of the time, but more about power and control. And of course, it is not on the victim to prevent the assault. We should be teaching men or women that rape is not okay and that they shouldn't be, and that, your clothes are not an invitation. Somebody being drunk and willing to make out with you is not an invitation for it to go forward. So it's really trying to take that back and say we can wear whatever we want, we can be whoever we want, and we don't deserve to be assaulted. The only consent is an enthusiastic yes. Even if we were flirting with you, you bought us a drink, we're making out, until it's an enthusiastic yes, there is not consent.
I'm sure you saw the cup of tea video that was going around. I loved that, where it shows these, squiggly stick figures. And the man who's narrating says, basically think of it as though you had a guest over and you offered your guest a cup of tea. And if your guest falls asleep while you're preparing the cup of tea, don't pour the tea down his throat.
What? What do you mean?
I think it should be we'll have a talk afterwards about that. And if your friend wanted tea, and then when they get the tea, they changed their mind and they don't want tea anymore, that's okay. You still don't force the tea down their throat.
Right.
And if your friend even starts to drink their tea and then decides they don't want the tea, they're allowed to stop drinking the tea.
Yeah.
Well, it's sad that this is even a conversation that
Right?
had.
Well, I think that it's not so much that people don't understand consent, it's that they don't care. They think that they're entitled to that person's body no matter what. And your no doesn't matter to them. It's not that they don't understand the word no. It's they actively disregard it, which is so sad. But I think it's something that we can, work to eliminate. It'll take a lot of time and effort, but just having that awareness and people speaking up and sharing their stories is bringing this out of the closet to say this is happening to women. It's not isolated experiences. It's really an epidemic, and trying to get more legislation, trying to get better sex education so that we can prevent this from continuing to happen in such huge amounts, and then hopefully not happen at all eventually.
That's great. That's really great. Great. So, speaking of sex education, Arianna just wrote an article that was fascinating about, how sex education has sort of evolved over the years. And I'll let you kind of, lead into that. But I thought that was a pretty interesting article.
Well, that was something that Your Tango was doing a whole series on shame, and they asked for somebody to write about school-based sex ed and the shame-based sex ed. And it was great because Lorrae and I had recently become acquainted. And so I asked you, for a quote for that, and you gave, a really wonderful one. I brought up a lot of really important points, so what it does for women when they've had sex and they feel that shame based on the education they had in school or from their parents or from their, religious background, and how that makes them perceive themselves and how it affects their lives. So how do you see that playing out through the women who come to your website?
Absolutely. Well, personally, I was called boy crazy from the time that I was like 5 years old. And not that it was slut shaming per se, but it definitely didn't help to, stop me from being boy crazy. It was this negative label that then you're like, okay, well, I'm already boy crazy, so I might as well just kiss every boy on the playground. I can't.
You weren't like nervous about cooties or anything like that?
No.
The boys don't like cooties.
Oh, that's right. The boys don't like cooties. That's true.
It's definitely the same thing when you get a little bit older and you're called a slut. It's like, well, maybe you weren't even having sex. Maybe you had only had sex once, but now you have this tarnished reputation. You can't go back from it. Not having sex isn't going to like bring your, non-slut label back. So you just get this negative label, and then it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. You can't get out of it, and then you might as well kind of live it and have fun. And that's unfortunate. I think it's a coping mechanism that we use, and to kind of reclaim sexuality for ourselves and say, hey, if you're going to call me that, I might as well embrace it and enjoy it. And that's part of why I created Slutty Girl Problems as well. But I think that we can reverse that process from such a young point just by having more comprehensive sex education and including pleasure and consent, and not just having it be about, STDs and abstinence and be afraid, but to say, you can do it on your terms the way that you want, and here's some tips to do it safely, but really to chart your own path, and that's okay and accepted and allowed.
I think you brought up such a good point, which I hadn't thought about, but I think all the time I have a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old, both boys. And from preschool, the girls were so aggressive towards the boys, and forcing that the boys would talk about, she forced me to get married today.
Girls
Wait.
get brutal
What
sometimes.
happened to this when we grew up? I mean,
The forcing to get married.
Sorry. Yeah.
That never goes away. That never goes away. That'll always be there. That'll always.
Someone will force you one day. Don't worry. Somebody watching this right now will force you. But the girls are the ones who are really, working the relationship with the boys. Mm-hmm. And the cootie thing, the boys have the cootie thing going on.
Yeah.
At that point. And my older one just did cotillion last year, and they wear white gloves. And I thought that was to be fancy, but they're called cootie guards.
Oh, wow.
And so they don't have to touch hands.
Wow.
With the girls.
Is that something that they chose for themselves to do?
Or is that
It's
a school
something
thing?
that the people who lead the cotillion came up with as a way of dealing with the issue.
Oh my God.
That's
And
sad.
that the boys were having, and
Sad
that the
to
girls were
start
having.
shame so
I
young.
know.
But what I think is really interesting is that we think about men and older boys as being the ones who are so focused on sex, right? But really, from a young age, the girls are trying to make their way, but we teach them so early on that what they're doing makes them crazy or makes them too aggressive or that they're forcing. And then we tamp down the girls. And so we're both like kind of quashing that in the girls and also not raising up the boys. And so we just have this
Out of balance.
completely out of balance situation.
Well, I think for, young men, we don't really start obviously hitting our peak until, probably like towards the end of junior high and high school. And, up until that point, we're just cool. We're kicking back, we're doing our thing, hanging out, having a good time. And then, the puberty hits, and then it's like we're sex crazy after that. But we've always been or come from that stance of being just cool and seeing how things play out. And then I think that reestablishes itself further on down in life, where you want to be cool and you want to be the cool guy. You don't want to do too much. You don't want to say too much. You don't want to, put too much out there. That's what I think. So,
I think it depends on the guy, but and I think what's really interesting about this is, okay, so you guys are really just starting to think about that and think about how to be cool
right.
when you hit around your early teens. But the girls have already been told, stop.
Right.
So now you have these girls who are being told, don't do that. And then the boys are coming up to them saying, hey, let's do that. And then the girls are like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so that's where the disconnect is already starting, because they're not being taught, it actually is fun. Like, sex really is fun.
Yeah.
It's just not for now.
Right. Sure.
And so because we're so afraid that if we teach it that way, that they won't wait.
Yeah, or that they're just going to have these like uninhibited sexual encounters with everyone that they meet. And I think it really comes down to almost not trusting women to make good decisions about their bodies. We have this fear that women are just going to run wild, but in reality, that's really not the case. We are totally capable of making decisions about our bodies in a responsible way.
Well, and that's a much bigger issue across the board.
Yeah.
Because I posted on my Facebook page a video from BuzzFeed that I just thought was funny and I related to. And it was showing how women aren't taken as seriously in the workplace and with friends and, across the board in their lives as men. And so it showed these different scenarios where this woman would try to say something and she'd be blown off. And then a guy would say the exact same thing, and it'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea."
I
or
didn't
that's
see that.
whatever.
That's funny.
Yeah, and somebody went nuts about it
boy.
on my Facebook page, just like it's not true, and like really, fighting it and everything.
That one person.
Yeah, but it does. It happens all the time, and so we keep thinking, well, it's an issue with sex education, and it's an issue with, the way the apps work, and it's an issue with, the way that the online dating is set up, or something like that. But there's this larger issue that we, you guys and like us guys are still not having open communication or being taught to communicate.
Well, just another arm of that. As I was reading your article, I thought it was really interesting how you used the word taboo, and it's so wild to think about sex and taboo in the same sentence in 2015. You know what I mean? It's just amazing to think that. So I'm surprised that we're still treating sex as, I can say this, the redheaded stepchild. You know what I mean? It's like, we're still uncomfortable. We're still awkward about it. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just weird. I find that odd that we're not completely 100% open about sex in the year 2015.
I love your red hair, and I always have.
Thank you very much.
I always will.
You know, and then I saw some of the comments on some of your sites, and there's a lot of like very, very ambitious and you know, strong-willed people out there that still feel sex is a very, very private and you know, taboo topic.
Yeah, I mean, sex is a tough one. A lot of the comments you're talking about the comments about the articles on porn this week? Mm-hmm. I put out some articles out just basically saying...
And sex ed too. I mean, there was some comments about the sex ed, but and the porn too. But
well, I linked to the sex ed article in the comments because somebody actually asked me if I was going to use porn to teach my kids about sex.
Yeah.
All right there. But
I saw that. That was an interesting
But I
comment.
think that the way that we react to porn is all linked back to that, which is that we still feel ashamed of it. And I think it all comes down to we just don't really know how to say we don't know and how to say that we don't know how to teach about something yet. And so it's easier just to say don't and like to scare people. It's like the way a lot of parents still, you know, try to scare their kids. Like a monster is going to come out and get you if you walk out of your room. You know, parents still do that sometimes. And it seems easier, but what it sets up are all of these problems down the road.
Sure.
You know, so we've done that with sexuality in our society for a long time.
Yeah.
Even just talking about virginity, it's really this like deficit model of like you lose it or you give it away or somebody takes it from you. And it doesn't have any agency of like you just taking ownership. And maybe it should be like we're gaining our sexuality, not that we've lost something, but that we're gaining all this pleasure because we're just approaching it right from the bat as, all right, you are this precious little flower. Now you're deflowered. Now you're broken. Now you're used up. And it automatically puts into our heads that it's something to be ashamed of or something to keep quiet, or if you are having sex, you better not talk about it because other people are going to think that way about you.
Totally.
But that's a conversation that needs to be had. It's all about the education and starting at that point.
Mm-hmm.
What's the viewership? I don't know if you can fully get into it, but what type of people go to your website? You know, is it obviously it's mostly women? Is it mostly young women? Is it all different ages? Have you ever like done the analytics on it?
Absolutely. It is mostly women, but surprisingly, it's only about like 60% women. So a lot of men are coming. And it does tend to be younger, between like 18 and 25, 26.
Oh, wow.
But we do get all the way up into 60s on Google Analytics. And really, people are coming from all different age ranges. I think that there's something for everyone. And it's amazing. So many even older women and older men have come to the site just to get basic sex education that they've never gotten anywhere else, or to kind of just learn a new trick or tip, because it wasn't taught in schools to them, or if it was taught, it was very basic. And I think people want to know how to have sex, how to have pleasure, how to have fun, and how to make it good for themselves and their partners. So it's a big draw to have some comprehensive information out there that's sex positive and not shameful and is really reliable for them.
Well, I know dealing with divorce professionally, sex is just a huge issue across the board. And I don't think that there's been a single couple I've worked with, maybe one, where the sex hasn't been an issue. And
do you think
most
it's
of them have been
compatibility issue or just not communicating about it?
I think it comes down to a few different things. I mean, my belief is that the number one reason for marriage is that it's a couple who shouldn't have gotten married in the first place because one of them knew that it wasn't really right or they weren't really in love. And so I think when you already are a little bit hesitant about somebody, it's really easy to start to dislike them so much. And it's really hard to try to be, you know, sexual with somebody that you dislike.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I've decided over the past few months to stop talking about it as like to be intimate with, because there are all kinds of ways that people can be intimate. And so I don't think it's always an issue of intimacy. I think there are just some people who, you know, you get married when you're younger and you have other things that you want to explore, and movies like 50 Shades of Grey come out and, you know, whatever, if it was good, bad, or indifferent, how you feel about it, it puts ideas out there that you may have thought about and not thought that you could think about. And now you want to, but maybe your spouse thinks those things are bad or disgusting and you guys never talked about it before.
Absolutely.
And so it's hard to have a communication about it.
But that's why that's why it always goes back to the conversation and the importance of it.
Yeah.
But that's why when we, you know, just teaching your kids openly about sex instead of letting it be done in the classroom, like so many people do, you have, in order to expect your kid as a teenager or as a 20-something to have conversations with you about that, you have to have started the conversations earlier. They don't just suddenly one day want to talk to you when you have never been willing to talk to them about something.
Yeah, definitely.
And so when you grow up thinking that way, I think then it becomes really hard to talk to your partner about it, because then it feels, you know, like, oh, this is something we're not supposed to talk about. And guys, I think, worry about being judged. And the women can be really judgy. I've experienced a lot more women being judgy.
Never seen that.
Never. Have you? I don't know what you're talking about.
Not, well, for sure the women are the ones who think, you know, oh, I caught him watching porn. Like, I get that a lot. Like, I think he's a sex addict because I saw he was watching porn.
Yeah.
And I say, well, we established that he was male.
Yeah, I think it's
what's the next problem? Like, what else happened?
And it's so important to kind of, I think, for adults to understand that there's such a huge range of sexuality, and to talk about that with their partner, and to really be on the same page before you get married, because sex is a huge part of our lives. And if we're not having good sex our whole lives, that's a really, really sad thing to go without. So to just kind of put all your cards out on the table. And I think a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm nervous that my partner like won't like it or won't like me. But it's like, but do you want to be with a partner for 40 years and then you never got to be spanked because you were so afraid to talk to it with them?
No. Whoa, now that's taboo right there.
But that's the thing. Actually, I don't think it is anymore. I mean, that I feel like the whole definition
not everyone
of
likes
it. They may not like it. That's not the same thing as saying something's taboo.
Oh, well, no, I know.
There's preference, and then there's, is it a fetish or not?
Right.
Like what is like that line?
That's a great question.
Between just a preference and a fetish.
But that's
you know,
also,
if you can't get off without it, I think that makes it a fetish.
Right. Definitely.
But if it happens to be stimulating or arousing you, that's not a fetish necessarily.
But that's part of the whole conversation. I mean, you really, it takes, I think, an enlightened couple to navigate those waters of saying, oh, do you like this? You know, that kind of thing. It kind of might take a little of the romanticism out of it for some people, or the excitement, but I think it's important to at least kind of open the dialogue, because if she likes it taken from behind, it's like, what do?
Yeah.
You have to have the conversation.
And it can actually open so many more doors, because if you're on the same page about that, then like how many other of the same page you're going to be on? And you can explore so many of your different fantasies or desires, even if you decide down the road that it really wasn't for you, or you didn't like it, or you don't want to try it after all. At least you can have that conversation openly, rather than just having like missionary position sex with the lights off and under the covers for your whole life, which is like such a sad way to live. And I think so many people are doing that just because they didn't have that
Well, the lights off is the big thing, because women are so worried about their bodies.
Absolutely.
And they're so afraid that the men aren't going to want to see them, or they're going to get turned off when they see them. But I mean, my thought about this in general was, I know a lot of people who are divorced who are really looking into all of this stuff and exploring it, and probably, visit your site and sites like that. But wouldn't it be great if a married couple decided to like look through it together, or send each other articles from it?
Or even a couple watching porn together and saying, hey, that looks really hot, we should give that a try. It's a great way to kind of, even though it's not sex education, it's a great way to just kind of develop your repertoire of fantasies.
Well, it's like we can only, we have our kids' sex education to fix,
and
then it's like we have to undo our own before we can even start it over again.
Absolutely. And you kind of have to like wipe all of those shame-based messages clean, and realize that as long as you're being safe, sane, and consensual, that your sexual activity is really okay, that it's between two consenting adults, and that's what matters. Nobody's getting hurt without their consent.
I also see people who make a lot of comments about, well, all the angles and stuff in porn, they're so unrealistic, and if I really tried that, then
it's a movie,
I get hurt. Well, it's like, well,
I mean, you want to see a home movie? Do you want to see someone's personal home movie?
There are plenty of people who watch.
Well, actually, there are a lot of sex tapes, but a non-celeb stage sex tape. Do you want to see that?
Stab your eyes out.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Some people probably shoot it on beta. I don't know.
Right? Exactly.
I mean, of course, there's going to be lights. There's going to be, I mean, everyone wants to be seen in the best light, and there's some people that pay a lot of money to see some of this stuff. Even though,
and also the angles, I'm sure, so that the camera can capture the angle, but. What's the big deal if somebody falls off the couch?
But the big deal is you better be up on yoga. That's what the big deal is.
And go to the gym.
What better, motivation do you need?
Right. Then you're getting sex and health all in one.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's great for weight control.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
and all the chemicals that you release. I think couples actually bond. Also with divorced couples tend to live in sleeping in separate rooms. And it's like chicken and the egg. Usually they stop sleeping together, stop having sex together before they move into separate rooms. It's not like the separate rooms causes it.
Yeah. I actually read a really interesting article recently that said in married relationships, so many people view sex as something where you celebrate. So like you go out, you have a great dinner, and then you celebrate with sex, or something really great happens, so you celebrate with sex. But how about to reverse that model and to say, we can be in a fight and have sex and as a way to connect, or maybe something really sad has happened in our lives.
Angry sex.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just to, kind of comfort and soothe each other and let each other know that you're there. I mean, there's so many different types of sex, and to kind of embrace it in all the different aspects of our life.
Well, Ari, I think what you said in one of your articles that when you do your mediation work, that sex is usually the number one reason that people are, it's one of the big reasons why couples break up, is because they're just not having sex anymore.
Right.
And so I don't know, maybe you want to expound on that. Is it just because it's so readily available and maybe it's not exciting anymore? I don't know. I find that interesting.
But I think there's when that break starts to happen, and I mean, I'm not throwing you under the bus. It's not. I mean, you talk about your divorce, but you've been through it. I don't think any of us have been through a divorce. But when that break starts to happen with somebody that you've invested,
I have been through 5 of them. Thank you.
Really?
I'm kidding.
I don't know how to respond to that. Yeah, right, exactly. But when that break starts to happen, that intimacy is one of the first things I'm sure to go. If it hasn't already been gone.
But it usually happens before the break. You know what I mean? Like people are.
No, he means the break and having sex.
Yeah, the break and having sex. Well,
the breakdown of the sexual relationship.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. No, well, it's typically one-sided at first, and it's not necessarily the woman who's turning it down. I think that's a big misconception.
Right.
A lot of, and that causes problems for women, because it feels. And I mean, for both sides, really, because for a woman, it's embarrassing to say, my husband doesn't want to have sex with me. And for a man to say, I'm having issues with not wanting to have sex with my wife, doesn't feel like a, right thing for a man to be admitting to. Like he should be the one who wants it, know? So it's hard for both people to talk about. And then one person is the one who initially didn't want to as much, and it starts to build resentments, and they, try to talk about it. And I don't see couples having a lot of help from couples therapy in this area for whatever reason. And so, you're already mad because somebody's been rejected, and somebody else is mad because they're feeling pushed. And so that's sitting there. And then you're grumpy because, I get grumpy when I haven't had sex in a while. I don't know about anybody else. So, it's like, then you have that grumpy factor added on. And then
that's like, I understand not eating and being grumpy, but not having sex and being grumpy. Like I personally have never heard of that. I mean, the one thing, but it's just like, I need a burger and
to survive.
A cock, it's like,
I've seen that before.
Kind of like that.
Yeah, I feel like it just adds to the overall grumpiness that might be going on in a certain time. Right. That's so funny. Interesting.
Right. Yeah. So, and I think that it starts a really frustrating pattern, and you just don't come back from it. And by the time you try to deal with it a few years later,
and it seems like it really comes down to communication, because they're not having those conversations about their sex and what they want and what they expect. It's kind of like these implicit, things that they're doing, and think that their partner will get the hint. It just doesn't work like that. We have to be super open.
But that's where you also get these mixed messages, I think, as a woman, because I started to speak really openly about sex when I started working in the divorce field, and I started seeing how much of an issue it was. And I feel like I have to talk really openly with the couples, and then also with people who ask me questions about it, as a way of just, education towards what I see as the issues in marriages. Because I really do believe in marriage, and I believe in love, and, I don't want people to get divorced. It's just that they're going to do it better, right? So a friend of mine sent me a message last week saying, do you know, as a woman, if this is like a thing that women will specifically not wait to kiss you longer or wait to sleep with you longer if they like you more?
Well, I've actually even read that in like women's magazines where it's like, if you really like him, you better wait till the 4th date or the 5th date. And it's kind of a little ridiculous.
Well, and he said it's so confusing to me because I've now had, 2 women within a few months who've ended up telling me the same thing. And my take was she's just not into me because she won't let me kiss her.
Right.
There's a downside to that. I think there's so much emphasis posted on, when to do this, when to do this. And we've touched on this in previous shows. And sometimes you just have to go with your instincts, go with your guts. That's what I do as a guy. I'm sure that's what Jeff does. If the feeling is right, usually if we've been dating for a little while, we have good instincts. We can read women pretty well. We know when something's going to be well received. And sometimes that'll crash and burn. But usually, we know when something's going to be well received and when it's not a good time to do something. Yeah. So, yeah.
I've talked to a lot of guys who have no clue. Like, they are oblivious.
Really?
Oblivious. Totally oblivious. I'm like, really? No signs. Like, you didn't have any social cues. You didn't pick up on anything. And they are like on another planet.
Then they're not paying attention. They're not paying attention. That's just what it comes down to.
I don't know, because then as a woman, I know I feel really torn. Now, as a 42-year-old woman, I feel really torn because I feel like if I really like somebody, why am I going to hold off on making out with them? Because I'm going to want to if I like them. But is that going to mean that I'm going to end up not having another date because we just made out? So
I was going to say something along those same lines that there's almost this component of fear. Like, if I do act on my desires, am I going to be viewed unfavorably or as a slut or too forward? Or are they going to think that I do this with everyone or that I'm easy? And then all these messages are just running through your head, and it really prevents you from doing anything. And then you wait for them to approach you. But even if they approach you and you accept, it could go the same way.
But that's also why another thing. Oh my God! It just escaped me. When something like that, a scenario like that happens, you guys make out, and it doesn't there has to be, the conversation needs to continue, not just about the education side, what we were talking about earlier, but in that moment, we make out, I'm gonna say, I really enjoyed that. I really want to see you again. I'm gonna be straightforward because I don't want there to be any confusion. I don't want there to, I sit across from somebody when I'm usually in a relationship for a while. I'm usually like, what are you thinking about? Get out of your head. You're in your head. I can totally see you're in your head.
Yeah.
Just let's talk,
But you are, and I will say this for any women watching who might be of baby making age, that you are a truly special guy, Jeff, in that, right? I think that you're very, you are very
only women of baby making age, Jeff. Okay.
According to Jeff's preferences. Okay.
Jeff likes all time.
Wait, hold on. If we're going to check preferences, then we can, as per our conversation earlier, we can go down and add a lot more to that.
All right. Well, you can post your list later on our in the blog. You'll do a blog Jeff's with your list of wants and needs. But I find, where I was starting with about that I started to talk really more openly about sex doing this work, is that then if I'm dating somebody, I'll be talking with them openly. I'll be trying to communicate about it, and initially they might be really into that and excited, and I like sex and I'm willing to say that and express that. And then I find I've had this reaction from more than one guy of, well, wait a second. Are you just like this with me? Is it just because you're so attracted to me? Or are you, basically, I actually had one guy tell me that I was hypersexual, which is the term that's used for a sex addict.
Oh, wow.
Just because I was wanting to have sex more often than he was.
What are you doing later? Kidding.
Hypersexual. Interesting.
Yeah, which is, and so that to me is one of the problems with the whole...
Well, that's part of the double standard.
It's the double standard. It's the problem with the labeling.
I've had very similar experiences in my field of work. I usually start out, if I'm talking to a guy and he seems interested, I'll say that I work in social media and marketing or sex education, and try to kind of feel their response. And sometimes they'll have a great response. They'll be very interested. And then they're like, oh, well, what's your website? And I'll say Slutty Girl Problems. And then they just change right away. Yeah. And it's not bad. They want to run away. They're like, do you want to go to the bathroom and have sex right now?
Really?
And I'm like, what about me being a sexual person means that I'm just non-discriminating anytime, anywhere. Let's just go
guys,
for it.
They'll go right there. It'll be
And I think guys then need that kind of talk from a young age too, that women and their bodies, they can be sexual at one point and not necessarily with you or not right now. And that they have agency. It's not just like at your beck and call and on your command.
But also there's another element too, real quick, in terms of you being hypersexual, right? Well, are you like this way all the time? Well, it's like you're in a relationship with somebody, right? And she had all these experiences before you, and that you have to understand that. So, you know, it is what it is. Right here, right now, she's with you. And that kind of confusion of like, well, you must be a slut or something because you're overly sexual. I mean, that's just gotta disappear. That mindset.
Yeah, it's always baffled me because it's like, okay, I am over 40. I have 2 children. There's no like hiding that I'm trying to do here, that I'm not a virgin, right? So what's the big deal?
You're not?
Sorry, mom and dad. But yeah, you know, so I find that really, really frustrating and confusing, that double standard. And it's something that I've thought about a lot, even before I knew about your site, about the word slut in general. Because to me, you know, slut means somebody who is indiscriminate, you know, willing to have sex with anybody, not just about, you know, enjoying sex. Yeah. And I can understand and I can appreciate the, you know, taking back and like the reclaiming of the word and trying to use it as a way to call attention to an issue of shame that's going on. And then I look at what's happening on the flip side. And like there was this article in Vanity Fair a few months ago talking about millennial guys, about how they're called fuckboys. And I had never heard that term before. I know you guys hadn't heard that term. And Lorraine's like, oh yeah, sure, fuckboys. You know?
What?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, can you like tell us more about how that's...
Yeah, it's kind of a word that describes guys who are kind of like the players, but in a negative way. They're not just like going out having fun and enjoying their sexuality, but they're being rude and disrespectful. They're texting you at 2 a.m. They're sleeping
So
with...
Not to find out about your day.
85% of Tinder, basically.
So those guys should be called the fucking idiot boys.
Yeah, well, that too. So
yeah, it's really geared towards younger guys, but definitely with this connotation that their sexuality and the way that they're expressing it is particularly disrespectful to women. And I do think that that's a valid issue, not that we necessarily need to label it in a derogatory way, but to kind of call out that behavior and see why they're doing it and get to the root of that and try to change it, because any sexual encounter should not be laced with disrespect. It should always be coming from a place of like being respectful and appreciating that person, even if you don't like want to get to know their personality, just respecting their feelings and their preferences and their desires and not forcing yourself on them.
I feel like guys like that have terrible relationships with their mothers. That's what I think.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely with women.
Yeah.
We just got real deep there.
I know. I got super deep
I just
there.
think that...
Doctor?
The problem for me is that I agree that it's a problem. And then but I think that coming up with this, you know, mean name calling format for them doesn't help, because I think what you're saying is so true. Like we need to figure out what's going on for them, because that doesn't, you know, what is it about this? You know, is it really just as simple as, you know, you're just the same kind of 20-year-old guy that was always out there, or is there something deeper going on in our society or not? But, you know, putting somebody under a label just puts them on the defense. Yeah. It makes them feel ashamed too.
Well, not only that, but I think like, you know, women aren't totally faultless in this. I think a lot of times they will play into this maybe, you know, fuckboy persona a little bit and have fun with it and feed it a little bit. I'm not saying all women. I'm just saying there's a couple women that might like this, that might enjoy the chase, the craziness and all that stuff. It's not totally crazy to think that.
But
do you mean that there are women who want to have like friends with benefit relationships? Or
I just think that, like, you know, a lot of women don't like the nice guy. They'd rather have a guy that's a little bit edgy and a little bit, you know, rude and all that stuff. They might like that a little bit. So
yeah, but just like
that's
guys,
what keeps them going.
But those are the women who have issues with the father.
Of course.
You know,
yeah,
so,
exactly. And you can flip it right back on the other side.
Right.
So I'm just saying.
And that's fringe too. I think
bit.
I think that a lot of that kind of, I don't want to label it, I was going to say deviant behavior, but I think that kind of attitude is a lot more fringe than norm.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know.
Is that what you're saying? I mean, what do you see women asking about the most, or when they're coming to your site, what do they seem to be looking for? Which kind of posts are they gravitating towards?
I think that there's definitely a big element of kind of like dating etiquette and how to I think guys aren't really talking about what goes on in their head. So we're left a lot of times to guess what's going on and like, what does his text mean? And is he being rude, or is he just not interested, or is he just actually busy with work, and trying to decode that.
Get out of your head. Just ask. Just ask.
By the way, I read a really interesting article called "How to Get Out of a Disaster Date" on your site, and I thought it was hilarious. And I think, I don't know, one or two of them were like,
why am I so not surprised?
Have you used
that was
those?
the article
fake.
that
No,
you liked?
you know what's funny? I've never used these before. I think this was obviously geared more towards women, but one of them was to fake an illness. Shoot, I can't remember.
I swear to God, I was on a date with somebody who showed me, he didn't use it while we were on the date, but he showed me that he had an app on his phone that he programs it to call him, and his daughter's phone number and picture show up.
Oh.
So he can be like, oh, I'm sorry, I wouldn't take it, but it's my kid.
Clever.
And because his kid was a teenager. And then he would be able to go and say, my daughter needs me, I have to leave.
One of my favorites is just start talking about feminism and women's rights, and it'll send them running.
Oh.
But then what happens if they start to engage?
Then maybe it'll be a better date.
That's true. That's true. That's very
You
true.
shouldn't have to think that hard.
Yeah, the other thing that we get a lot of is just kind of simple tips, like how to go down on somebody, or how to have sex in different positions. Or actually, our biggest questions is, how do I have an orgasm? Because so many women just don't know about their bodies and what to do with their bodies, because obviously that's not taught in sex education about pleasure. And I think women just wanting to learn how to please themselves and their partners, and explore that part of themselves, because it's not really talked about anywhere else. And porn is not a representation of real sex. It's a fantasy and really like desire and play, but there's so many different varieties of sex, and trying to bring that to people.
Yeah, definitely. Huh. That's really interesting. Well, your site's awesome. Like I said, I
Thank
checked
you.
it out, and I'm not a woman, but I found myself fascinated by some of the articles, which will remain nameless right now.
But that makes me think, I was wondering about this earlier. For guys, are there really any men
not anything
sites?
Comprehensive like that. Jeff, have you seen anything like this? I don't know. I mean, some kind of like site for, there's
you see articles around online, but everything kind of seems to be the same thing. There's no, like on your site, it's centralized location. You can kind of dig in on all the things. So, I don't think there's anything for guys. And the other thing too with guys is there's a pride element. I'm a guy, and I'm like, and I had that with all my friends from back east. All my friends in New York, like, I'm a guy. I'm fine. I'm fine. Really?
Guys don't take to advice as well as women.
No.
We just don't. It's like either, and I'm sure this shows up a lot in relationships, but it's, it's our way or the highway. We're a lot more stubborn. It's like we don't want to take advice on tips because we're the, on sexual tips or whatever, because we're the man,
Yeah.
We know how to do things right. We've been doing it, since the beginning of time.
And on the flip side, women are kind of always told that like we're weaker, we're not as smart. In some ways we're like broken, our bodies aren't as strong, or our minds aren't as great as men's. So we're always kind of seeking out how to be better.
Yeah, I think it's great. So what's next for you?
Well, we're going to be launching a YouTube channel, SGP TV, that's going to be talking a lot more about sex in a different way that we do on the web. It's kind of more personal, more about my history and personal experiences in doing interviews. So really excited about that. And I'm also going to be launching a personal site at loraeb.com, which is going to hopefully do coaching for any women that are kind of going through these issues and want somebody that's kind of been there before for support, not necessarily like a therapist. Obviously, I could recommend ASECT therapists for that, but just that would want some support and understanding and tips for how they can kind of go through this time in their life in a more easy way. And also doing speaking at different events, conferences, adult shops on all types of topics, whether it's sex tips or kind of getting more into slut shaming and sex positivity and feminism. So really just trying to bring this message even more out there so that it's more accessible to more people.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, that's so cool.
I just find you to be such an impressive human being.
Thank you.
I have to say, from the first time we spoke. So
thank you.
do you want to let us know your Twitter handle or any other social media? We'll put everything onto the site, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
great to put it out there.
Absolutely. It's www.sluttygirlproblems.com, and we're all over social media at SluttyGRLProbs. We also have a Tumblr that's sluttygirlproblems.tumblr.com, and then the YouTube channel is going to be YouTube/Lorae B, and I'll send you all that.
Great. And we'll have it all on the site.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank
You
you.
are our inaugural guest, so you will be forever remembered,
Proud to
and
be it.
cherished, and talked about.
We'll make you a sash or something.
Exactly. We will.
Send it.
We will.
Thank you. It's been a blast. So
No,
wonderful.
It's awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. Anything to add?
You're great.
Do you have
Awesome.
any? Do you have any good dates this past week or no?
Yeah.
No. All right, we got to
You're the
work on
dating
that.
machine.
Look up Jeff Gross online. I'm John Polansky. This is Arianna Jeret. Thank you so much, Lorrae. Jeff Gross in the booth. If you want to find us, we're on Twitter at Greater Dater. Facebook, we're The Greater Dater. On YouTube, we're The Greater Dater. And Gmail, greaterdaterpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for watching, listening, and being just generally awesome. We will see you next time.